The turn of events originated from a phone call. My dear mother initially did not support my pursuit of a PhD. Like many mothers out there, she believed that a girl pursuing a PhD might have difficulties marrying. It wasn't until I got together with Ethan that she stopped mentioning it. But this year, as I am nearing 29, she started becoming anxious again. She would occasionally call me, subtly asking when am I getting married, until I finally ran out of patience and had an argument with her. Ethan happened to overhear it. He didn't say anything, and later, he did not bring up the content of that phone call. Of course, I wouldn't bring it up voluntarily to him either. But ever since that day, Ethan started acting unordinary, as if he was avoiding something. He began to leave early and return late, often coming home at midnight under the guise of working overtime. Even when it came to intimacy, he began to subtly reject it. I enjoyed hugging him in my sleep at night, which even evolved into a kind of instinctive bodily reaction. But later, when I woke up in the morning, I found him facing away from me, almost in a cold, even defensive manner. I tried to communicate with him, but he would always use busy at work or recently too tired as an excuse, blocking all my conversational topics, until one day, I went to his company to find him, but overheard his mother, that aloof and arrogant beauty in a scornful tone, saying that a girl of ordinary family background like me, attempting to leap through social classes via academic qualification, does not deserve Ethan. She urged Ethan to break up with me this month. So, who is good enough for him? The arrogant beauty glanced at the side of Ethan. Next to Ethan stood a girl I had never seen before. A delicate-faced girl holding Ethan's arm. Without even pushing the door open, without even listening to Ethan's upcoming answer, I just silently turned back and left. A strong sense of self-esteem didn't allow me to storm in and ask Ethan for an explanation. Apparently, even a PhD from a prestigious university is still just an ordinary person in their eyes, trying to achieve a class leap with degrees. But at the same time, the growing fear in my heart these years was slowly subsiding. Until last night, Ethan was sitting on the sofa, hands crossed, staring at the floor. While hugging Pudding's head, I casually tied braids on it, looking as if nothing had happened. Pudding, as if sensing the tense atmosphere, did not move, laying on my lap. After a moment of silence, as if out of the blue, the understanding from these 3 years seemed to converge at this moment. We both started speaking at the same time. Sophie, I can't marry you yet. Ethan, let's break up. We looked at each other at the same time. There was shock in Ethan's eyes, while in mine there was indifference. Since I had already anticipated the outcome, why take the roundabout route? Why? It seemed as if he had been struggling for a long time, yet also like he had just understood what I had said. Ethan slowly asked these 3 words. His tone was filled with disbelief and anger. It's been 3 years. The novelty has passed, Ethan. Can you marry me? I paused for a moment, observing Ethan's expression. As expected, Ethan's face showed difficulty. I continued. I'm already 20 this year. It's time to consider marriage, yet you're like a child fluctuating in mood. Moreover, you're only 24. I can understand. At this age, you must still have a desire to have fun, and I wouldn't feel secure marrying you. Ethan didn't say anything, but kept staring at my eyes. His face gloomy, as if trying to spot a trace of a lie in my expression. Since the last time I mentioned breaking up, Ethan hugged me and cried all night. Since then, he forced me to swear never to casually mention breaking up again. I'm not done with having fun. I calmly met his gaze, my eyes firm and resolute. Finally, he reddened his eyes and gritted his teeth and agreed. I was under scrutiny, but it's fine because I genuinely wanted to break up with him. I had, however, lied about the reasons. I wasn't eager to get married. On the contrary, I was not ready to get married. I was even afraid of it. Over these few years, the fear growing inside of me was that, as my relationship with Ethan gradually stabilized, marriage would inevitably be the endgame and mission of our relationship. But the person who had not had enough fun was me. I did not know how to face our disparate family conditions, how to please my in-laws who did not like me, how to support him in business, or even how to nurture a child that would inevitably be born under so much strain. But I wouldn't have to face these problems if I didn't marry Ethan. And with my educational level and abilities, as long as I didn't aim too high, my happiness would skyrocket. I would have a good job, realize social value, and still have plenty of time and freedom to do what I wanted to do. Who said that 20-year-old woman PhD? Us have to get married in a hurry. Please, who wouldn't like a free life? I shouldn't cheat on Ethan emotionally, and I'm not against marriage either. If there's enough respect and appropriate freedom, I would be willing to sacrifice some freedom and add responsibility for love and long-lasting companionship. But this is something Ethan couldn't give me, or rather, his family was inherently too restrictive for me. Besides, he hasn't really chosen me. His cold attitude and avoidance these days were only accelerators to the decision I made. I lay in bed looking at the ceiling, and the tears slowly ran down my face. Ethan sat on the couch for a whole night. Early the next morning, I began packing my stuff. The 2 years had integrated my life here, but after all, this is Ethan's property. He had coaxed me to live here 2 years ago, and now I had to figure out how to erase my traces here. After packing my stuff, I walked into the living room. Ethan had not gone to work. More surprising was that he was playing ball with Pudding. He had seldom been kind to Pudding in more than a year, and Pudding was such an ass-kisser. The less you like it, the more it sticks to you. Now it was wagging its tail. Hi, Pudding, let's go. Ethan's hand touching Pudding's head paused. Pudding? That silly dog didn't even turn its head. I was so angry that I picked up the leash and was going to put it on it. Pudding, hearing the sound, quickly hid behind Ethan. Ungrateful creature. Ethan pacified Pudding with a pat, and then said to me, Pudding, like, sit here. Besides, it is raised by both of us. You can't just take it away arbitrarily. Ethan, when have you ever raised it? When I'm not at home, I'm afraid you'll throw it away. Sophie, you're slandering me. In fact, when you're not at home, I'm the one feeding a kibble. Ethan stared at me, responding calmly. Ethan, things that are hopeless, don't cling to them. I turned away, not looking at Ethan's suddenly red eyes. Pudding, if you like it here, don't come with me. I dragged my suitcase and turned to leave. Pudding quickly ran towards me. Ethan's hand unconsciously wanted to grab it, but he caught empty air. Phew, my good child didn't let me down. In truth, I'm not as casual as I may seem. 3 years is a long time. Even Ethan has grown some feelings for Pudding during this time. Not to mention spending day and night with each other. I first met Ethan on an extremely bad day. That day, my dissertation got rejected yet again. My barely seen supervisor scolded me harshly, hinting at the possibility of me having to extend my studies. From my childhood, I have always been a determined girl. After I got into postgrad, I chose a highly academic and reputable supervisor without realizing I'd land in the hands of a boss who never bothered. He was always traveling either within the country or abroad for exchange programs, offering very little guidance for me. However, he was utterly dedicated when reviewing my dissertation, as if he was afraid that I might graduate. By the time I returned from my supervisor's office, it was already very late. As I was walking down the rather quiet street, absorbed with the terrible possibilities of extending my studies, I was overwhelmed by dread and sadness. In my dazed state from pulling all-nighters editing the dissertation, I was tripped over by a stone and fell to the ground. At that moment, my pent-up emotions gushed out like a dam breaking. As I was indulging in self-pity, a motorcycle stopped beside me. The rider was clad in black, donning a black helmet. He stretched his hands and pulled up his facial shield, revealing his deep, starry eyes and messy hair showing above his forehead. The gentle moonlight shone on him, reflecting in his eyes. After some silence, he finally broke the ice with a crisp, slightly teasing voice. Miss Sophie, do you need a ride back to school? I could feel my cheeks warming up, was a bit embarrassed that someone witnessed my fall, but also worried about the intentions of this total stranger. I'm not so naive to trust strangers just because of their somewhat handsome appearance. Noticing my hesitation, he said, I'm Ethan from the economics department. You've taught our class last year." After a short pause, he continued teasingly, "Miss, I'm not even afraid of you." "Why are you afraid of me?" I felt a bit embarrassed and touched my nose, trying to stand up. My legs hurt a bit. It seemed difficult to walk back to the school at this time, so I silently accepted the helmet Ethan handed over. "I'm not a teacher. I was just covering a class for my supervisor," Ethan mentioned, and I recalled that last year, for some inexplicable reasons, my supervisor made me cover one of his undergraduate lectures. During that lecture, I was so nervous that I almost forgot my rated password. "Of course, I know. You came just for one class, and then that irascible old man returned. We all felt regretful. But you taught a class anyway, so you are a teacher to us." I got onto the back seat of his motorcycle. My ears were burning. "It's been so long, you still remember me. You have a good memory." "Who let you give us the key points of the final exam in the only class you taught?" I fell silent with guilt. In fact, I had no clue that my supervisor would be so irresponsible. Directly turning his research direction into the last big question, accounting for 50% of the final score, under the excuse of testing the student's ability to explore. However, that night, in the passing warm wind, I leaned on Ethan's back, vaguely sensing the light but rapid heartbeat. To this day, I still don't know to whom it belonged. My graduation thesis finally passed, and the dark clouds of possible graduation delay that were hanging over my head disappeared. I applied to continue my Ph.D., intending to delve deeper into my academic journey. Unexpectedly, my advisor suddenly realized the value of my pursuit and gave me considerable help during my Ph.D. application process. And Ethan, after graduation, went to work at his family's company. Everything that happened afterward was both amazing and natural. Ethan courted me for a while, and I accepted his affections. Our relationship, like any other, was a mix of plainness and sweetness. In my second year of Ph.D., I moved out of the dormitory assigned by the university and moved in with Ethan. In retrospect, in the 3 years of being with Ethan, although we had many small quarrels, there were never any insurmountable issues. For example, sometimes when I look at his handsome face, which is striking enough to make anyone fall for him at first sight, I couldn't help but ask him if he had a childhood love that he could not get. When I learned that there was no unforgettable first love or the moonlight one longs for, I sighed in disappointment. Or sometimes, when I look at his affluent background, I would secretly hope that, like in the TV shows, his parents would hand me a check for $5 million, asking me to leave their son. But this never happened. Although his parents weren't really fans of mine, they never tried to buy me off. We had our share of differences. At the beginning, we had disagreements about our spending habits, but later I stopped resisting his occasional expensive gifts. And sometimes, he would feel neglected when I was immersed in academic work. As a result, I learned various boyfriend pacifying skills such as preparing snacks and writing love letters. After many small and big arguments, he even started learning how to cook just because once I fainted due to low sugar levels after working intensely on a project at the university. In the hospital, he held my hand tightly, his eyes slightly red. He looked at me, but was too heartbroken to speak. To make sure I ate properly, he taught himself to cook. Thinking about it now, our biggest dispute was about having a pet. I wanted to adopt a dog, but he adamantly disagreed, claiming that a pet would take away my love. I wouldn't budge either. Adopting a dog was a fixation for me, because when I was a child, our family dog who had been with me for a long time got lost, and I made a vow that once I was independent, I would definitely get a dog. Because of this, I told him that we should break up, claiming that our life philosophies were different. Ethan's expression then was as if he wanted to tear me apart, and for the first time, he yelled at me. "Sophie, have you gone mad? Over a dog?" Eventually, Ethan gave in and we became the proud parents of Pudding, a golden retriever. Even though Ethan never liked him very much, Pudding loved Ethan a lot. I even suspect that Ethan must have saved Pudding's life in a past life. After breaking up with Ethan, I moved back home. My mom, upon hearing about our split, firstly scolded me, then began her lengthy discourse on my marital affair, followed by rehashing old issues, saying that she never should have agreed to let me pursue my doctorate. In the end, she launched into her vision of my bleak future. As I was eating noodles, I mumbled unclearly, "Their family looks down on me." This statement successfully irritated Linda, my mom, who then began a tirade. How high do they think they are? Just because they have some money. How dare they look down on a PhD? My excellent daughter, I looked down on them. Yes, indeed, I held my bowl, fanning the flames for my mom. Absolutely, chimed in my dad, holding his newspaper on the couch, joining in the fun. Not until my mom started planning blind dates for me did I feel that staying at home was unbearable. As a result, I began to spend more time outside under the excuse of preparing for my teaching position at the school. After all, human ways of dealing with problems are similar. Adhering to the principle that a peaceful breakup does not necessitate deleting contact information, I did not remove Ethan's Wecketer telephone number. Ethan rarely posted on his friend circle. When we were together, he only posted a few lovey-dovey posts, always quite brief. However, once we broke up, he began sharing his daily life, and it wasn't 2 movie tickets, it was afternoon tea for 2. Was our life together that uninteresting? Taking the principle that you can ignore things you don't like to heart, I blocked his friend circle, because I had been busy preparing for my teaching position at the school. I had no leisure time to observe Ethan. My busy life did not leave me to drink or cry about the breakup late at night. The next time I saw Ethan was at that noodle shop outside the school. After dealing with some important paperwork, I went into that noodle shop that Ethan and I used to frequent. I liked that noodle shop a lot. I went there at least once a week. As soon as I entered the shop and ordered a bowl of scallion oil noodles from the boss, I met Ethan's gaze. Ethan's gaze was less than friendly, as if he was trying his hardest to hide his emotions behind indifference, although his obvious exhaustion and a hint of resentment were still prevalent. Honestly, seeing his obvious dark circles, I still felt somewhat sorry for him. The woman sitting opposite him noticed his gaze and turned her head as well. It was the girl I used to see in Ethan's office. She had permanent hair, fair skin, and was wearing a dress that seemed pricey. She was looking at me curiously and then gave me a smile. What the hell am I sorry for? I calmly found a seat and sat down. How could an ex-boyfriend affect my meal? But until my bowl of noodles was served, the girl sitting opposite Ethan was still staring at me. She did not seem bothered by the fact that her style did not match this humble noodle shop. Was this some kind of drama where a rich girl experiences life in the countryside? Why would 2 rich kids go on a date at a noodle shop on the school snack street? Would your mother not fall dead upon knowing this? Let's go. I heard Ethan's voice, and then the ear-piercing noise of chairs scraping against the floor. After a while, I looked back. There was no sign of them, and more than half of their noodles were left on the table. Wasting food is shameful, I thought indignantly. But the tears fell into my noodle bowl when I wasn't paying attention. It's okay. I continued to stir my noodles because saving food is the traditional virtue of our country. There was a period when I stayed late at school because of a project. Ethan worried about me going home alone in the snowy weather, so he often waited for me after work at this little noodle shop to go home together. This noodle shop carried our intense love during the coldest season. When I got home, I unexpectedly received 2 messages on my phone. One was from Ethan, saying I had left some things behind. I thought it over. It should not be anything important, so I responded with just throw it away. There was no reply from him after that. The other message was a friend request. The profile picture was a pink cartoon rabbit. Without thinking much, I accepted it. An immediate message came from the other side. Sister, hello. I am Ethan's friend. My name is Annie. We met at the noodle shop today. I was somewhat surprised and didn't understand why she contacted me. Whether she was an ambiguous object or a regular friend, there should be no need for her to contact me now. Seeing me not replying, she quickly added, Sister, I am currently studying in Sweden. and I need to select a finance-related course for the next semester. I heard that the professor is really strict. Ethan mentioned that you are very good. Can you help me out? This girl is quite familiar. I frowned and thought for a while, but still replied, I will be very busy these days. I may not have time. She replied almost immediately, no problem. I can wait until you are free. I did not reply because I really did not understand this girl's behavior. Also, I was not lying. I was indeed busy with a project. I was pulled into this project by my mentor after I graduated with my master's degree. His reasoning was that very few people graduate normally from his hands, and he thought I was a rare talent. When I heard this, I silently prayed in my heart for my senior and junior fellow students. And my doctoral mentor was also the main person in charge of this project. They are old friends. I later learned that this project's technology, which gathers many experts and has been developed over many years, is a big piece of cake in this industry. Industry innovative technology, university backgrounds and resources, talent team, and government support make many companies extremely interested in it. Among them was Ethan's parents' company. Project cooperation is business negotiation in the eyes of businessmen. Since it's business, the so-called dining table culture cannot be avoided. Normal negotiations are not always pleasant, and the dining table helps to bring people closer. William rented a private room and invited us to stay for dinner after the official negotiation. Ethan naturally participated as well. At the dining table, it was nothing more than a praise fest among big shots. I could only keep my head down and eat, while avoiding Ethan's lingering gaze. Do you need me to get you a glass of milk? Donna leaned a little closer and asked quietly in my ear. It's okay, senior. A little bit of alcohol can't knock me out. The person sitting next to me is my senior brother. Like me, a hardy person who managed to overcome our mentor's rigorous training. So when I joined the team, he took care of me, probably because we shared the same hardships. Of course, I think the main reason is that after I joined, he is no longer the only person being scolded. I suddenly felt a chill. I looked up to see Ethan turning his face away, not looking too good. Suddenly, I heard someone calling my name. Are these two your students? They have been reading for their master's and PhD under us, and they have been involved in the project for several years. This girl looks familiar. William looked at me with a smile, as if he was concerned about his juniors. Curiously enough, after having dinner together, he didn't seem so pleased with me back then. Back then, I was seen as a student who was still studying by Ethan's parents. I was Ethan's girlfriend and I met them. But today, I am their guest of honor. I know that all they care about are people who can determine the outcome of this project. But I earned their respect through my own abilities, forcing them to regard me differently. Sophie just graduated with her PhD this year. I asked her to just do research with us, but she insisted on staying in school as a teacher. Now she's probably the youngest teacher in our school, my mentor said in a tone of blame, but everyone could hear his satisfaction with me. Young people are outstanding. Indeed, William's gaze at me was filled with unhidden appreciation. Speaking of which, Miss Sophie and Ethan have known each other for some time now. I smiled and nodded, as if Ethan and I weren't recently broken up, but longtime good friends. It's normal for excellent young people to know each other. Like father, not like son, Ethan is also a promising young man. Although I encourage Ethan to follow in his father's footsteps, I am glad he's also finding his own path. After the dinner, I said goodbye to my mentors and also declined the kindness of senior brother Daniel wanting to send me home. I stood by the roadside, the wind blowing on me, reminiscing about today's events. Sophie, do you want me to drive you home? Ethan had somehow appeared next to me. Ethan looked at me with a crooked head and a smile on his face. This time, you're really teacher Sophie. I laughed too. I was very happy today. What? Do you remember the time you took me home for dinner 2 years ago? Ethan lowered his head and didn't answer. It seemed he also remembered that not-so-pleasant dinner. Your dad didn't smile at me once that day. It seemed that I was not your girlfriend, but someone who came to demand a debt. It was after that time that Ethan had a fallout with his parents and moved out of the house. I'm sorry. The person who hurt me wasn't you. You were almost on the verge of breaking off with your family. And now, things are great. But I'm not okay. My cab is here. You should go home too. I opened the car door, got in the car, and didn't look at Ethan again. Ethan, the respect and love isn't something that can be earned just by the love of the other person. The core project was already completed and college hadn't started yet, so I suddenly turned into an idle person. Not only was I unused to this, Linda too wasn't accustomed and hence started to arrange blind dates for me. To this, I strongly protested, stating my intention to establish my career before starting a family. However, Linda refuted. I think you don't want to settle your career but become a hermit. Even though I had reason to argue that the average age of first marriages in the city was 30, I eventually couldn't overcome the pressure from the bloodline and ended up being pushed onto the path of matchmaking. Miss Sophie, I have gone through your information beforehand, and you are truly remarkable. Being able to complete your doctorate at 20 and stay in school to teach us both classic and professional success, praised Michael. You're too kind. Michael, you too are a talented young man, a handsome one at that. Having grown up, I can confidently reciprocate such professional flattery. As Ms. Sophie probably knows, my life before was just about endless work. I was always thinking about how to take my career up a notch until my mother fell seriously ill, and I might be about to lose my last close relative. That's when I realized that family is the most important thing, the well-dressed man sitting opposite me said. Sobbing a bit as he spoke of his mother. My mindset now is to get married as soon as possible to fulfill her wish. I only have my mother and my family. Ms. Sophie, you don't have to worry about conflicts with elders. It's okay even if we don't want children. I also absolutely will not intervene in your career. This respect is definitely mutual. What an ideal candidate, Mrs. Yan has picked for me. I was about to reply when a dark shadow stormed over, his tone full of extreme anger. I dare you to agree. At this point, I suspect that Ethan and my stepsister have put some type of tracking device on me. How else could they find me at my blind date? I was irritated by the incoming glances and murmurs around the room, with probably at least 10 versions of this story floating about. Ethan, calm down, I advised. Sensing something off, Michael quickly excused himself and left. Don't you think you are being childish, Ethan? Irritated, I frowned. Yeah, I'm childish. That's the reason you dumped me, isn't it? He retorted before storming off. I was about to leave to when my stepsister blocked my way. Can we have a chat? Regardless of her intent. I had no mood for back and forth. No time. Excuse me. Just a quick chat. Big sis, she batted her eyelashes sweetly. All right, I sat, and we moved to a coffee shop. Miss Annie, what did you want to say? I asked, leaning back, arms crossed. Big sis, don't be so hard. I just wanted to clarify my relationship with Ethan. We're just ordinary friends, Annie explained, fiddling with her coffee, her innocent gaze unbroken. And then, we've been hanging out all the time because of my aunt's insistence. We belong to families that have always been close. But I went abroad when I was young, so I don't know him that well. The fact that we met at the noodle shop last time was purely a coincidence. Ethan had been lurking there for many days just to catch you. I assure you, we definitely didn't stalk you. So you've come to clear Ethan's name. Annie looked puzzled. Why should I clear his name? Then, holding her face in her hands, I approached you today because I wanted to confirm. I know that you are single now. Would you mind having a girlfriend instead? I was taken aback. What? Why do I like you? Because you're so cool. And even cooler for dumping Ethan. Besides, I grew up in Sweden over there. Her words were cut off by the ring of a phone. I glanced at the screen and rejected the call. Soon the phone rang again, rejected, and then rang again. Ethan, are you out of your mind? She finally picked up the phone, her face disgruntled. After a brief conversation, She looked a bit changed, hung up, and said apologetically, "Big sis, I'm so sorry, I have something to attend to. I have to go. Let's talk next time." She rushed all the way to the door, but not before she said, "Don't ignore my messages, big sis." When I returned home, the events of the day had taken a toll on me, and all I wanted was a good night's sleep. However, as I lay in bed, sleep eluded me. Today, I once again told Ethan that he was childish. When Ethan was courting me, I often said that he was naive. At 21, Ethan was like a troubled teenager, apart from his excellent grades. He loved motorcycles and extreme sports. His deep eyes always carried a hint of indifference and tiredness, yet he had an excessively handsome face. This kind of Ethan was very popular on campus back then. Someone even posted a secretly filmed video of him online which garnered over 1 million views. That's how his rich second-generation identity was discovered. Later, he began to court me because he claimed to have fallen in love with me at first sight during a class I taught. I was bemused, but his ideas were a bit dangerous, and rejected him on the grounds that he was too young and not mature enough. Afterward, Ethan turned different. He took off his motorcycle gear, shed his domineering attitude, and started hanging around me every day. When we were together, I asked him if he regretted changing so much for me. He gently ran his fingers through my hair and said, "I didn't give up what I liked for you. Because I love you, I finally had a reason to let go of the shackles that trapped me." I knew Ethan's upbringing had left him loveless, so I had doubts about whether he was with me because he saw some maternal aura. But in reality, during our cohabitation, Ethan was the one who took care of me meticulously. Ethan. As I lay on my bed, I found myself uttering his name. Suddenly, my phone rang. The name on the display was Ethan's. Was this some kind of summoning creature? Answering the phone, I heard chaotic noise from the other end. "Hello, is this Miss Sophie? Your friend drank too much at the bar. Can you come to pick him up?" I hesitated for a bit, couldn't think of anyone else to delegate this task to, and got up to change my clothes. When I arrived at the address the server provided, it was rather deserted. Looking around, I soon spotted Ethan sitting on a sofa, obediently cradling a bottle of alcohol, staring at me. I marched over, angered like a mother about to chide her child discovered at a cyber shop. "Sophie, you're here," Ethan greeted me cheerfully, his eyes in the dim light, a blend of a blur and innocence. "Ethan, I need to take you home," I said, avoiding his gaze and trying to help him. "Do you want to go home with me then?" Ethan's tone was full of grievance. "Ethan, we've broken up." "Oh yes, we've broken up?" Ethan fell back, raising an arm to cover his eyes. "So that's why you're in a hurry to go on a blind date to get married, is that it?" "That's right. I want to get married. Can you marry me?" Annoyed. Taking calls from an ex-boyfriend late at night was the last straw. Ethan uncovered his eyes and looked at me. There was no trace of alcohol-induced grogginess anymore. As expected. Men can sure act pretending to be intoxicated until your heart breaks. Ethan got up from the sofa and took out something from his pocket. She then got down on one knee. "Sophie, let's get married." Saying so, he opened the box in his hand, presenting the diamond-ringing CD as well as all his sincerity to me. Suddenly, the people at the bar moved in closer, loudly chanting, "Marry him, marry him." I had seen this ring a long time ago. Once, I had fantasized about the day it would appear before me and how I would feel. Would I be panicked or happy? And I didn't anticipate that today. Seeing it finally, all I felt was sadness. Under Ethan's surprised smile, I trembled as I reached out a hand. Closing my eyes, I softly closed the box. "Ethan, I'm sorry." I squatted down, covered my face, and wept. I didn't dare look at him. "Why, Sophie? Am I too late? Are you angry?" Ethan sounded like a child who'd done something wrong and knew not how to remedy it. I wiped away my tears, pulled Ethan up, and left. I can't accept Ethan, but I also didn't want to see him endure the embarrassment of being gawked by others. No sooner had we stepped out of the bar than Ethan released my hand. It was late, barely any people were around, and the moonlight was dim. Sophie, you've never thought of marrying me, right? I looked up at Ethan's red eyes. Yes. What? Ethan, behind you is an entire conglomerate. No matter how hard I try, I will always bear your label. No matter how hard I study, your parents will always look down on me. My voice trembled a little. Sometimes I think to myself how lucky I am. It's as if I'm living in a novel. If I'm a bit more intelligent, a bit more patient, maybe I could indeed become a wealthy wife. But Ethan, this is not the life I want. I don't want to be trapped by marriage, so anyone can have you, but not me. Because in your plans, I've been sentenced to death. Haven't I? I felt a sour taste in my mouth. Yes. Ethan displayed a desolate smile. Sophie, you've always been talking about the conglomerate. Have you ever thought about Ethan? I can for you? Leave the conglomerate for me. Ethan, stop being naive. Sophie, you managed to weigh the pros and cons of our relationship repeatedly, and then give me up. I can't do that. Whether I love you more, or give more of myself, I don't mind. I will resolve the issues you're worried about. Ethan, don't you understand? This is insoluble. But in the end, I didn't voice out these words. Instead, I just turned and walked away. Autumn was arriving and the night winds had a trace of chill. I hugged myself and step by step resolutely walked away. In the following months, I stepped up to the podium to finally become a recognized teacher, Sophie, achieving a goal I had always desired. Ethan would still send a few harmless messages every day, which I seldom replied to. Annie had returned to Sweden to continue her studies, but we still kept in contact frequently, apart from some professional-related questions. She would regularly send me pictures of Swedish scenery and food. Plus, she often complained about how rude and arrogant Ethan was as a child. Linda had ceased her enthusiasm in introducing potential matches for me, for which I was grateful. One day, I jokingly asked her why she was no longer worried about my marital status. The usually outspoken and temperamental Linda fell silent for a moment before saying, "You don't laugh anymore." I was taken aback and didn't know how to respond. Am I not happy now? I have always been very demanding of myself, setting goals for each stage of my life and striving to achieve them. Therefore, my image in the eyes of others is usually austere and unapproachable. I want people to see me as calm and strong so that I don't have to expose my hardships to the world. When did I start being a person that is easy tears and laughter? Probably around the time I met Ethan. The way we met wasn't so pleasant, but he blamed my vulnerabilities and ingeniously involved himself in my joys and sorrows. He loved me so unreservedly that I didn't have to worry about him mocking my failures. It felt as if he would embrace everything about me. I walked along the small path of the campus, feeling connected to this place where I had spent 10 years. Had I trapped myself? Then, a call came in from a person I never expected, Ethan's mother. In the coffee shop outside the school, the once proud and conceited lady lowered her head for the first time. Ethan, he's reverted to his old ways. He's nearly 25, but still likes those dangerous sports. Mothers always have an emotional touch when talking about their children. Tearful, she said, he also told us that he's attracted to men. He's not getting married and won't have children? Isn't this nonsense? Dumbfounded, I watched Vivian wipe away her tears. Auntie, wasn't Ethan like that before? I know we paid too little attention to him when he was young, but didn't he change after being with you? Could you help me? Dear Auntie, Ethan and I have been apart for a long time. I'm afraid there isn't much I can do. Our conversation concluded with a few courteous words. Returning to the office, I couldn't help but chuckle at Vivian's words. Ethan is still so childlike, and the scene of first meeting Ethan flashed across my mind. In the evening, I was packing up to go home when I heard a colleague exclaim, "It's snowing? It must be the first snow of the year." I took out my spare blue umbrella from the drawer and hurriedly set out for home. The snow hadn't fallen long yet, but there was already a thin layer on the ground. Ethan, unconsciously, I muttered this familiar and once dear name. Sophie, what you fought for shouldn't serve as an excuse for you to escape, but should give you the confidence to take risks for yourself. Can't you even surpass that coward Ethan? Because you are Sophie, you should be fearless. I stopped in my tracks, holding my umbrella, turned around and walked swiftly to the side of the road, finally stopping in front of a familiar black sedan. The snow was falling heavier now. I stood there, rapped on the car window. Soon the car window rolled down, revealing the flustered face of the person inside. Ethan, let's talk. Ethan, and I returned to the small noodle shop. It felt like a long time since we last came here together, leaving me feeling suddenly nostalgic. Ethan, I started. Your mom came to see me today. Ethan glanced at me guiltily before lowering his head like a child who'd done something wrong. I found myself in a fit of stifled laughter. Ethan, are you a primary school student? Still at an age where the teacher has to talk to your mom when you do something wrong. You're not my teacher now. Ethan grumbled, So, what then? Ex-girlfriend? The color drained from Ethan's face, his lips quivered, but he couldn't find the words to retort. Ethan, what's the use of relying on these childish methods to obtain a temporary compromise from your parents? I lowered my gaze, stirring the noodles in my bowl. Speaking softly, Ethan, you proposed to me, but have you really considered what a marriage entails? Sophie, you've completely rejected me. How do you know that a life with me wouldn't be happy? I love you. Ethan, a marriage can't be built only on love. To love me, you must do more than just verbalizing it. Upon finishing, I got up and asked the owner to pack my noodles. After all, it's everyone's responsibility to save food. I left the noodle shop, leaving Ethan alone to ponder. Ethan, you can't just watch me struggle hard alone. You need to be with me. Afterward, my life was fairly good. Most of the time, I was teaching, writing papers, working on projects, and trying to keep a low profile in the office during the annual job title review. I traveled to many places, embraced vast deserts and grasslands, gazed at towering glaciers and peaks, and marveled at the insignificance and greatness of humanity. My relationship with Ethan seems to have stabilized at being just familiar friends. We occasionally check on each other and even discuss some work matters. I also knew that he left the consortium to start his own business a year ago, but I didn't pry into a situation any further. Life is short. We should love ourselves, our kin, the mountains, the earth, and the people we love. As for the final outcome, who can predict it? Until the moment of death, how can there be a final conclusion to life?